So how will these packages be delivered? Who would deliver? What are the constraints? So our next panel would have highlights on those issues. And let me invite on stage Ravi Patel from Smarter Logistics, Vipul Arora, Kohler Company, Bijay Rana from Nivea India Private Limited, Anup Chauhan from DP World, Shailin Shukla from Pick Truck, and to lead the discussion, I would like to invite on stage Dr. Rakesh Singh, Chairman, ISCM. Thank you.
So we move on to the fourth panel on e-commerce, last mile delivery, and omnichannel fulfillment. I think these are few buzzwords of the new commerce that has actually emerged today. And its foundation has always been there. But during this disruptive time, what we have seen is that e-commerce has picked up with such a speed, as well as startup systems have brought about so many delivery players. And firms are now forced to look at their distribution channel in a very different way. They can't anymore rely on just the traditional or the modern retail, but omni-channel is becoming an imperative. And I think all these have led to something what we say in basic supply chain theory, that firms are now full of bullwhip effect. I think demand variability that we are talking about, and we're trying to implement it with so-called digitalization and information system, faces another extreme challenge of fragmented distribution channels, as well as the kind of proliferation in demand that you have seen. You see any FMCG system, and you find that the demand and the products are proliferating. The numbers are increasing. There's so much of pressure on you. And suddenly, you know, all of us who did forecasting based it on the historical, this thing, we use our Excel sheet, we move to APOs. I think there's one challenge. And the challenge, I said in the morning, I did not get into this, but I think I'll go before, the challenge is how do you really plan for these things? And what should be the basis for these plans? How do we really understand that the whole aspect of planning essentially is not about whether we can forecast or not, but if we can understand the three basic frameworks to look at how does distribution and the new challenge in distribution can be actually brought into more sensible way of looking at it. If you see a large number of FMCG companies largely, and I think we have two of them in a way, they have been having intermittent demand, and so is maybe a kitchenware company or utensil company or whatever it is. We have a lot of long tail, as they call it. How do you really look for the long tail in the omni-channel? And who brought this long tail to the business? Amazon. And I think one very clear, I think I'm learning a lot from my panelists before this particular panel happens, and I think a student of mine taught me a lot of things today. He's on the panel, Anup. While discussing, there's something that is very unique that comes up. If you look at the evolution of e-commerce from modern retail, you just analyze Walmart. Walmart was an amalgamation of almost all the larger FMCG companies. They came as a bigger partner, Procter & Gamble, 21%, HUL, so many percentage, and so many percentage. And they thrived on the modern retail. What differentiates Amazon essentially is its ability to fragment this particular so-called organized players into smaller, aggregating smaller players and create a great Amazonization effect. And that has led to a system where long tails have happened. How do you plan for this? I think this is where the planning leads to a larger question. How do you secure your logistics for this? How do you secure your delivery for this, fulfillment for this? And I think this is something that needs to be looked from a very, very aggregate, integrated planning. I think when we talk about logistics, we talk in silos, and that really misses the wood because we do not know how to plan for this. So my first question goes to Anup himself, and I'm not going to follow any structure. All of you can just come in. I think we have said we are going to just have a free flow discussion here. What I have to say, I've raised it to you. Now the discussion goes on for another 30 minutes between you, and then we'll open it to the audience. And that's the way we go about. I think that's okay with all of us, right? So the first question, I'll put it to all of you, but start with Anup. What are the larger challenges in the executing space of e-commerce logistics?
So thank you so much for being here, and thanks, my friends. Very enlightful day, and really enrichment, of knowledge and thoughts flowing, and we really, learned from each other. But I think before I start on the e-commerce and answer your question, it will be very important that where is this animal heading? We are talking about $350 billion business e-commerce by 2030. That's where it's heading. Now, is it only coming from people which are organized players in e-commerce? No. It will be coming from manufacturing-oriented, product-oriented companies also, because today if you see Levi's, while they might be shipping a lot of materials through Flipkart, Amazons, they also have Levi's.com, right, which is contributing a decent percentage of online business. It is also going to come from the small-scale traders. So there is a fraternity of almost 40,000 trade association which has gone to the government, and they've said that our business is at stake. You need to develop something, and there is open network digital commerce which is underway right now. And imagine once that happens, everybody would be coming on that platform, and they would be facilitating, and they'll be evolving. Challenges are immense. When we are talking about $40.8 billion to $350 billion, I think the biggest challenge which comes for any company, whether it is the e-commerce players or the product companies, would be the reverse logistics. Because today it looks very good. When from 4% of online business we have moved to 20%, but imagine when that goes to 50% or 60%, because the market is growing, return on e-line is nothing less than 30%. And imagine if a shoe is coming back from a branded product and what you're getting is a non-branded or a used shoe, how that management will happen. So that will be major issues. I think government is trying to really envisage that there is a big market. They're trying to play. There'll be a big opportunities for service providers, whether it is in warehousing or transportation, reverse logistics, or R-commerce we call it. So those would be the important pointers to really look at.
Yeah, so I think it's a good time for me at least to talk about e-commerce, because I was sharing this with Dr. Rakesh that the timing seems to be perfect, and we as a Kohler, we launched our D2C journey a month ago. We were always there. We had a Kohler store on Amazon, but we also decided now to foray into the e-commerce business of our own. So we wanted to have our own website like kohler.com. So it's already live. It's been a month. So I have those recent learnings and challenges which I would like to share here. So when we look at e-commerce and as an industry, it is evolving. So we started with cost optimization. We moved to a service-based model where today, we were earlier focusing on non-essential items like electronics, fashion. Now it has moved to FMV, the fruits and vegetables, the essential items where service becomes important. So the expectation of the customer has changed. It has evolved. Earlier, 2 days of delivery or 5 days of delivery was an expected norm. Today we are talking about 10 minutes delivery. So the expectation has evolved. So the backend has to evolve accordingly. So now we have those dark stores opened by various e-commerce players. But are these successful? How are they evolving? You know, it's still a process which is ongoing. Now the focus is on speed. People are ready to pay the price to get the service, to get the speed. And how do we get it? We get it through the technology. You know, if we just look at the last mile, it has multiple nodes. You know, it could be your route optimization such that you can deliver in 10 minutes. It could be finding the rider who can go and deliver, picking up the product at the last minute, making sure your inventory is up to the mark, predicting the weather conditions such that you can show the right ETA to the customer, whether you can actually deliver in 10 minutes or not. All of these are still evolving, and we still struggle as a consumer. When we look at that, we still struggle. And that is what the expectation which is building up, and the technology and the industry has to catch up on the e-commerce space accordingly. So all this is learning which we are trying to incorporate in our D2C journey. When we started in our previous panel discussion, we were talking about aggregation. So we had this dilemma when we started e-commerce. Shall we go with an aggregator or a standalone courier service provider who already has an association with us? So there are pros and cons of both. But I'll just tell you, when we raised the hand, nobody was raising the hand when we talked about are we going with the with the aggregators or not in the full truckload. But here we decided to go with the aggregation. The reason being simple, I have a good BCP in place when my trucks are not available with a single transporter. But here I'm integrating the track and trace of my courier partner with my system, with my website. So my BCP is not that fast. So can I take that risk? So again, the concept of aggregation comes into play. So there are players like ShipRocket and all who are there into the space, and they're growing. Because so it's all about technology when it comes to the last mile delivery, which is thriving. Companies and the aggregators like ShipRocket and all, they're also learning. You know, we face a lot of issues. We deal with bulky products. We supply mirrors and these shower doors to say 12th floor or to the 15th floor. They're not used to of that. If I deal with a traditional player like Delivery and some others like that, I can have those exclusive deals with them. They can have a floor delivery. But when I work with aggregators, they don't have those kind of services. So the moment we started, along with Chroma and Kohler, they reached out to ShipRocket and said, boss, this is what we need. You don't have it today, we need it in 5 days. Can you do it? You know, we got it done in 5 days. So they're also learning. So they're also evolving. So that's what we see. The thing's going to change in another 1 month or 2 months or per se. And then when I talk about the backend process, the warehousing part, the dispatch part, the packing part, we have to be thinking differently from our regular B2B operations. We have set up a separate team such that we don't copy the mindset of what we have in our B2B operations, because the agility is what you require here. So we have set up a separate team who will only focus on the D2C part, and we are also listing down on Amazon because we all have heard about what has happened with the Cloudtail, you know, so the deal which is there with Amazon. So in your warehousing, you have to evolve. There are a lot of challenges. People are not equipped, you know, you need to provide them right technology and tools, and most important is the mindset which needs to be there. So we need to work on the technology, mindset in the industry as well as within the organization. And I see those are the major work area where we need to focus in coming days.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think if I have to break down the entire challenge, probably I'll break down into 3 parts. One is definitely the planning piece. Second is in terms of execution, and third in terms of how do we really execute through people or maybe through technology. I think, as you rightly mentioned, you know, all this evolvement, you know, this e-com which is evolving from a $40 billion to a $360 billion, it has completely leapfrogged from, you know, almost is growing at almost like, you know, in our company we're growing at almost like, you know, 35-40% on a CAGR basis. What happens now is that e-com is further divided into 2 pieces. One is an online channel which is predominantly dominated by marketplace like Flipkart and Amazon. And also now it is coming like Omnichannel, wherein, you know, the DMarts of the world which are offering the local, you know, deliveries through an online channel. It's a hyper-local model which you have. The third piece, which is currently, which is under development, which talked about the ONDCP, wherein probably the retailers are coming on board, to make an online delivery. All the Zeptos of the world, all the Zomatos of the world who are making this 10-minute delivery, those are not been serviced by the Amazons or the Flipkart of the world. Those are being serviced by the distributors. So there are consumption centers, there are demand centers. Both are getting differentiated every day. Earlier in the conventional model, that, okay, your demand is coming from which channel, from which geography, which particular area. Now it is very much fuzzy. It's completely grayed out. You don't know your supply centers are the same demand centers. Amazon specifically, Amazon, Flipkarts, when the peak days, and there's a concept of business as usual, and have the event days. In the event days, Amazons and Flipkart, they don't have capacity in the respective warehouse. So what they do is that they flip the POs into different centers. So you service the POs into different centers that you don't know whether wherever you're servicing it, those are your demand centers or these are your supply centers. So back end, if you look at it, throw back the questions to the planner who's sitting in the organization. He doesn't know where to distribute the inventory. So the biggest challenge is that how do you understand the spectrum of distribution and where do you going to place your inventory? That is number one. Second thing, in terms of execution. Now, one of the biggest challenge every FMCG company is trying to drive is that how do we really drive penetration. And some of the products, like for our company, it's a little aspirational brand where the penetration is not so deep into the rural markets. Now, how do we go rural? To go rural, we definitely need distribution strength. And if you don't have a distribution strength, definitely, your products will not sell, or probably your product will not be, been purchased by the consumer. So there probably the emergence of some of the companies, which is like, this lot of distributor network, which is currently not been able to, drive that efficiency the way we drive it directly with our consumers, is that the elastic runs of the world, who are actually, really, making technology coming handy for all the major manufacturers to go and improve the reach into the, the heartlands of the world, wherein currently the distribution network is not possibly delivering in a very, very efficient manner. I think that is a two challenge which probably, we are facing as a company. And the third piece is in terms of execution and the people mindset. Currently, there are a lot of technology being evolved. There are thousands of apps which probably a lot of smart companies are delivering. So in a particular, in a mobile app or the mobile screen, at max, you can scroll around 15, 20 apps. But the amount of apps which is getting developed by different companies are humongous. So for anyone to completely get onboarded and try to synthesize the entire network of planning to execution is something which is definitely a challenge which we continuously are forcing, and I think is going to remain for at least a couple of years now. Yeah.
All right, let me...
I'll just add a few words. Firstly, thank you, Dr. Rakesh, for inviting us and the fantastic ISCM team for organizing this amazing event, and hearing so many people was really enlightening. So e-commerce is growing and e-commerce is exploding, and there's a dark side of e-commerce which probably very few people talk about or very few people want to talk about. That one thing is, with so many aggregators coming in, the hyper-local, the food deliveries and e-commerce deliveries, we all want, food to be delivered in 10 minutes. But is anyone paying any attention to the driver safety, their conditions? I'll give you an example. 3 days back, Deliveroo app was down in Dubai. Why was it down? Because a day before that, Deliveroo decreased the remuneration of the drivers by saying that for the same amount of money, you have to do more deliveries. If you don't do more deliveries, then you get penalized, and in effect, you get less money. So suddenly everybody went on strike. They could understand. I mean, they may be not so educated as us logisticians, trying to maximize productivity and reduce our costs. But are we being fair to them? Are we being honest with them? Are we being humane to them? I mean, it took the government of UAE to bring in a rule that all drivers have to mandatorily wear a knee guard and a shin guard. The number of accidents in a small city like Dubai of 3 million people, was 367 major recorded accidents where some of them were fatal. How many of these last mile delivery companies are looking into the driver safety aspects? How many of us logisticians are just pressurizing our last mile delivery partners into reducing cost, improving productivity? But is anyone asking that, look, make it mandatory for drivers to wear helmet, don't make them run around, give them a fixed salary? There's a disease called incentive. Yeah, the drivers will run. Believe me, in Dubai we have very high speed limits on some roads. You could go as high as 130 or 140 kilometers per hour, and everybody is driving at that speed. And you'll be shocked to see suddenly that a bike driver is driving in the fast lane at 130, 140. Why? Because some smart guy like me has put in an incentive scheme which makes him run faster at the risk of his life and limb. Imagine, on a highway, you are competing with the Nissan Petrols and Land Cruisers, and a tiny bike is riding at 130, 140. Let us be humane. Let us look at the driver safety. Let us, force our operators, our partners, consumers. How many of us are offering a glass of water to the guy who comes for a delivery during the period of Ramazan? A lot of people are fasting. How many of us are angry because he came late? Maybe his energy levels are low. Yeah, give him some kind of a tip, giving some kind of incentive. Force the companies to give them a fair label. Most of them are not insured. Why? Because they are vendors, they are contractors. They are not employed by the Zomatos or the Deliveroos or the Word. So I think I would request all of us, as users of these services for last mile in some way or the other, to be more humane. Make restrooms in our large warehouses, DCs, factories. Give them air-conditioned sitting areas, waiting areas. Give them clean washrooms. I think the e-commerce has exploded, but somehow we have, missed this important aspect of, driver safety. Thank you.
I think this is very surprising when we see that most investors and most, funding agencies put sustainability and responsibility at the core of their decision making. And they still fund people who do not practice these best practices. Ravi, what are your take on logistics service providers, challenges in e-commerce space, plus also the strategy that we need to really evolve to make it more competitive as well as responsible?
Thank you. So let me just introduce my company, because all the other co-panelists come from large brands. I represent Smarter Logistics. Smarter Logistics is a pan-India logistics service provider into express industry. We are a 9-month-old company, but we started with a strong legacy. So our co-founders are CXOs and leadership from Blue Dart, who made Blue Dart that it is today. And all the challenges mentioned by my co-panelists are very pertinent, especially about the sustainability and what we are doing for our partners who are actually delivering it, right? And let me start from the first point about the aggregators. In this industry, in the express industry and e-commerce industry, why aggregator penetration is so high compared to a trucking industry or other industries is because the service provider at the back of the aggregator are very strong. In this industry, an aggregator is working with maybe 10 top companies that provide the logistics service. Whereas in trucking, there are hundreds of the single truck owners that are providing the services. That is one of the key reasons why the aggregator model in this ecosystem is working quite well. That is step number one. The aggregator model also works well for the buyer of the service, because each service provider has certain limitations. So when we launched, even though we launched with a significant funding and significant operations, all the legacy of our founders, we are today about 2,100 pin codes, whereas pan-India there are 19,000 pin codes. For us to reach even half of that would take about a year or so, right? So that's the other reason why aggregation model works. But at the end of the day, when we talk about e-commerce growing, how is it growing, and what are who is adding to this e-commerce growth, right, in terms of the sellers? The first challenge comes there. When e-commerce started, it was all the branded products getting sold on e-commerce, and then the pickups were from their warehouses or selected locations. If you see more and more sellers getting added, the long tail of sellers, the first challenge comes at the pickup location itself. Just to give you a perspective, I'm not sure how, if you know, in e-commerce, the largest number of pickups come from Delhi, which is the second largest location from where pickups come in e-commerce. The second largest seller base is in Surat, not in Mumbai, not in Chennai, not in Bangalore, right? So all the next level of e-commerce growth is coming from small scale sellers selling 5-10 shipments a day. And on the same side, there are these reselling models where WhatsApp-based resellers or app-based resellers are coming into the platform selling more and more products. So that's the first challenge where e-commerce is going to, see pickups getting prioritized or getting the pickup done right. And the second challenge is about the variability of the demand in e-commerce. It's all over the place. I mean, people dealing in e-commerce today would know, they would have experienced in the last 3 months, for no reason, for all logistics companies, including the aggregator, Hyderabad has become a choke point. And we are unable to still identify why. Why on earth in entire India, there's so much delivery demand in Hyderabad, and none of the large providers, I mean, we are small in terms of operation, but be it any large service providers in e-commerce is not able to deliver on time in Hyderabad. People are putting embargoes in pin codes in Hyderabad, right? So all the level of planning, all the level of demand forecasting in e-commerce is going for a toss. And in all this, we sitting at the top planning strategy saying, oh, we need to do this, we need to do next day delivery, we need to deliver in terms of TAT. One day at one location there are 30 shipments, on another there are 300. The number of delivery riders cannot be scaled at 10x in one day, right? And that's why these kind of things happen. Because we are putting unnecessary pressure on the poor delivery guy that tomorrow you are sitting, aram se you're doing 10 deliveries in a day, today you have to do 100. So those are the challenges that are being faced. I think in terms of how we are doing it, we are taking much more sustainable approach, specifically in terms of the last mile deliveries. And it's a bit counterintuitive, but what we are doing is, till a certain scale is reached, we have all our last mile and first mile deliveries employed in-house on our payroll, not on incentive based, not on per delivery model basis. In the first 9 months and 6 months of operations, we are now about 700 odd team members, out of which 500 are pickup and delivery riders. All of them are in-house, right? So that's the first step we have taken to make sure we provide them with a better wage. We don't unnecessarily push them for incentives to do certain deliveries, to do so many, pickups in a day, and then only get the right wage. But yes, there's a long way to go. More and more e-commerce challenges are to come up. And in terms of the ecosystem, I believe in this ecosystem, aggregators and logistics providers are not on the opposite side of the table. They'll have to be on the same side of the table. There has recently been certain sort of challenges going on in this model where the logistics service providers have increased their prices for aggregators so that they can directly go to the customers, which are again being posed by the aggregators by providing, by burning money. And that's where the entire VC thing comes in. I think to make the entire ecosystem more profitable and at the same time provide the right service, all the stakeholders have to come on the right page and make sure that everybody is profitable in the sense and nobody is getting hurt.
I think, wherever I see about aggregators, one thing comes very clearly. Everybody works from their own sphere of influence. They do not see the profitability as a social good. They see it as a self-interest. I think Adam Smith was right at some point of time, but today he's wrong. When you look at self-interest, you may harm the social good. Starting from there has been a lot of feedback that the customers give to the last mile players, to the e-com player, and not many assimilation of these feedbacks are done into your strategies. And often it is ignored. For instance, you take Uber, right? I think whatever you do, they operate the way they operate. And they deteriorate the way they deteriorate. I think this has been everywhere in the world. It's just not a story of India. So how does one really see that, put the customer into the focus? So I'll start now with Salen.
So very funny thing happened with me. I was in Uber auto and the driver jumped a red light, which is like a very common thing in Gurgaon. Going wrong side, jumping a red light is what I'm from Gurgaon. So I immediately told him, I said, brother, what are you doing? Don't do this. I am not in a tearing hurry. I am not asking you to drive fast. What's the hurry? He said, don't worry, you don't know this Gurgaon. We drive like this only here. I gave him a 1 star. Probably he gave me 0 stars. Same thing happened with another auto, Uber auto, and he jumped a red light or maybe drove on the wrong side. I gave him a 1 star. He gave me a 1 star. The result was I got blocked from Uber. I could not use the app anymore. And while I was giving feedback to them, while giving a 1 star as to why I gave that 1 star, nobody ever bothered to call me and ask me that why did you give a 1 star? Was there something wrong? Did you really jump a red light? What went wrong? 0. Nobody cares, probably. Same way, in Dubai, again, a question of incentives, some drivers call me, sir, I am bringing a food delivery, but I am confirming the delivery now. I will reach after 10 minutes. I said, why do you do that? He said, no, sir, my incentive will be lost if I reach later than this many minutes. I said, okay, fair enough, I don't mind. I'm not in a tearing hurry. But once or twice, when it became very rampant, I gave a feedback to Noon, one of the second largest e-commerce company in UAE after Amazon. I said, look, your drivers are doing that. Maybe your system is broken. There's nothing wrong with the driver, but you are pushing him too much for his incentive or productivity, and they are finding a way around how to still get your incentive and not do the delivery in time. 0, no response. Nobody called. Nobody said anything. I called the call center of Noon saying that, hello, I have this feedback. Okay, sir, thank you, sir. We got your feedback. Somebody will come back to you. Nobody came back. So what is happening? I think in this rush of e-commerce, somewhere we have lost the touch with the voice of the customer, and these are very few examples which I am giving you, and I am sure there are companies which do listen to the voice of the customer, they implement suggestions, but working with very large organizations, I think is one of the major issues which I have seen, that people don't implement the suggestions given by the customer. Maybe it will help you to improve your system, process, productivity, or something, driver safety, but it looks like, there are too many feedbacks, or there's not enough people in the customer service to process those feedbacks and, bring them into action. Or they just read it, implement it, and don't get back to you.
All right. Anyone wants to respond to this?
I'll just add, maybe, we're talking about customers. Let's try to understand that what is the issue happening at the company's end, right? We're talking about them building the capacities for 2 months. That's a cost, right? And this is a lost capacity, which churns into their systems. They're making losses, but they're still continuing. There are a lot of new generation companies which are coming for very good, because they're identifying the nuances and opportunities where the waste can be eradicated. But again, they're on a run right now because they're trying to fight the giants. And when you're fighting the giants, you have to walk at the same pace at what they're walking. I think that is another element which is forcing. But I think there is a good side also, right? This is basically around the e-commerce platform. But if I talk about the omnichannel platform, which is more product driven by the companies, they are very, very sensitive, right? We were talking in the morning about sustainability of supply chain. I think they're very sensitive about it. They're very sensitive about the people aspect, right? They're very sensitive about the partners. The other thing that we talk on the aggregation model, I think what is important is, need to understand that for a manufacturing company, there could be a skewness towards the month end, which is always there in India. Last 7 days are the highest, heaviest months. Now our aggregator is not able to find that a solution into it. But I think when it comes to the online omni-channel product companies, so for example, Skechers, if they go heavily onto the online, I think definitely they will look at sustainable model. They'll not like to go into a model which is having customer issues, customer nuances, because if there is any customer complaints, it will come back to them and they will be very keen to address it. So it will take some time, I feel, while the giants would be trying to understand that how they'll manage their cost and how they will reduce the waste. And from both the ends, the product companies and the customers, they will keep on pushing for the delightful experience and the hygiene also of the people at the same time.
Anup, you have raised a fundamental question about omni-channel preparedness for the companies like Nivea or Kohler. And I think this is something which is very pertinent to a new model of planning. A very new model of planning. And how do you plan in such a situation where your e-commerce demands a continuous replenishment and your back-end supply chain is driven by the old MRP, which creates firefighting nervousness, and every fourth quarter in your bucket jumps up. Your demand is like this, the fourth quarter jumps up. How does one actually plan, and how is Nivea or Kohler looking at that?
So I think this first point that you also raised about the demand variability, how do we, in the case of omni-channel, how do we handle it? These are the dilemma which we are still evaluating. When we started our e-commerce journey, the question was about what my fellow panelist was also raising. Whatever demand I'm getting, is it my demand center or my supply center? The first question which comes is, because I'll just give you an example. Yesterday I was there in my Bhiwandi facility to review the new operations of e-commerce. I could see those packets which are ready for the Amazon delivery, and one packet was for UP. I have a distribution center which is also linked in Amazon in Haryana, but it is not being served from there. It is live there. That product is also available there, but the demand has come in Bhiwandi. I have done my demand forecasting region-wise, state-wise, and based on that, I mapped my warehouses and supplied. But now that is not happening. So because Amazon looks at its own logistics network and then they optimize, but I don't have any visibility of that front. So I don't know how much of my north demand is going to come and sit in west and in south and so on. So that's one struggle which we have today. The other aspect which comes is the inter-channel. Where do I need to set my priority? Is it the e-commerce? Is it my already established B2B business? Do I only need to think from the perspective of penalties or from the margins, or do I need to think in a different way? How do I set my priorities when I do the forecasting, when I make my products available to different demand centers? So these are the questions from the planning end or the demand sensing end, which are still evolving. And to be honest, the first part, when we have an external dependency, is something where we don't have the right answer as on today.
Yeah, just to build on what my friend has said, there is another element of challenge which we are facing, especially in the e-commerce segment, and not in e-commerce, even the regular brick and mortar modern trade channels, is that every big customer, big or small customer, have their own nuances of supply chain, and there are different levels of maturity as we speak. So a Flipkart model of supply chain in terms of integrating with a vendor is very different from the way Amazon works. So there are different operation models which are there, and their modus operandi is very different. So take an example of what he said in terms of where I'm going to do my demand, because I've already deployed my inventory in somewhere in UP, but the products are getting picked up in Bhiwandi. Now why is that happening? Because every e-com player is trying to strategize and plan its events in such a manner that it doesn't get crowded with the same kind of other e-com player playing in the same kind of a time zone. So they're trying to, disperse their events into a little more different manner. And this is that phenomena which has been adopted by every damn e-commerce player. Now what is happening is that because of this entire demand volatility has a huge amount of skew. Now say for example, Flipkart is very dominant in the eastern belt and the southern belt. However, Amazon is very dominant in western belt and northern belt. Does it mean these are the belts where probably we are getting the demands? Probably not. They are reaching out to the far more tier 2 and tier 3 towns, but probably the demand centers are still a little more, the supply centers are still on the tier 1 towns. So I think biggest challenge is that one is obviously the planning piece in terms of forecasting. Second thing in terms of their own process maturity. Their own process maturity is so in the different evolution stage that probably you are already at a very high level of engagement with a player like Amazon, but at a player like a Nykaa or any other companies may not be that mature. So how do you do a joint forecasting? Can we do a joint business planning with them? And joint business planning doesn't mean only top line growth. It also means the entire end-to-end integration about how you grow how you do your plan and how you are going to execute. So one of the things which we keep on facing is that everybody is at a different stage of maturity, and there are some organizations which are very poor in terms of the execution. Left hand doesn't know what is the right hand doing, and the planning is committing something, the execution team is committing something, and we have a lot of PO cancellation. So these are some of the challenges which are haunting the brands, the manufacturers, and that is also increasing the cost of serve. I think the cost of servicing those e-commerce players are actually increasing day by day.
I think that's a dangerous point and note on which you are ending, because every time we have been hearing cost to serve needs to decrease with